the keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. Keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. I promise we read every single review. Every single one is humbling. If you haven't yet, go leave a review on the podcast. Go leave those 5 stars. Or even better, share the podcast with a friend, with a colleague, someone you know who's into gaming or esports. We really appreciate it. It's how the podcast has continued to grow. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, Paul, but I want to talk about one, your audio quality sounds great. You're not in a hotel. And two, what's behind you? What is going on here? This looks awesome.
There is a lot of activity behind me. I am in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia this week, and I'm streaming right now, or we're recording this from a VOV. VOV is one of the brands of LAN centers here. And behind me, all the people you see are here for like a big Fortnite tournament that's happening as part of Gamers 8, which I was at yesterday, by the way. Mind-blowing, just like in terms of the scale of the whole thing. But a bunch of the people back here are competing in a Fortnite tournament at Gamers 8. I think today and tomorrow. There's like millions of dollars on the line. You have like a whole bunch of tier 1 orgs back there. So it's pretty cool. A lot of kids who are really cracked at Fortnite. And I'm in their streamer booth, which I think I'm probably one of the first people streaming from it because the plastic was still on everything.
That's the best.
It was brand new. Everything's brand new.
Well, I'm glad Fortnite is still alive and strong in the Middle East. That was one of the first games that really got me into streaming and just the entire ecosystem. I know we've had our thoughts on whether or not it's a true esport, but you can't deny its marketing ability, its ability to gather audiences and player bases. It's massive, and I'm glad it's doing well over there.
So let me say 2 things. One, I've noticed most of it is not no build Fortnite. This seems to be a tournament for Fortnite with building, which I already have an issue with. And then I see plenty of kids with controllers in their hands. And so it's good to see that the epidemic has spread to this part of the world, and that no one is immune to this. That this is an epidemic we cannot stop, unfortunately.
Wow. I would also say, unfortunately, after this show, you'll probably head into the next room and start calling out all these kids for not being true players.
Had I known, I would have brought a bunch of our Gamers Against Aim Assist t-shirts, which, by the way, you should go to businessofesports.shop and buy one if you're a mouse and keyboard player. But I should have come here and just sort of spread the word. I should have evangelized mouse and keyboard. Had I known, that I was going to see a bunch of controller players here. But no, I'm just joking. This is the meta here. The meta everywhere. Nothing I can do about it. But it is cool. And you can sort of, if you're listening to this, sorry, but if you're watching this, like the entire LAN center is covered in wraparound screens, like flexible, curved screens basically around the entire center. On all the walls, even the columns, like the load-bearing columns, are covered in screens. Like, and I don't mean like TVs on. I mean literally like screen wallpaper, like floor to ceiling. I've never seen anything like it. It's pretty cool.
I think the only solution is for any listener to just pop up YouTube, pop up the website, and check it out, because that. Even me looking at it, it's kind of hard to imagine, I think, without seeing it.
Yeah. But what is not hard to imagine is our guest today, Jimmy. We have an amazing guest, as always. And I feel like they just get better and better every week. We have this week, guys, on the podcast, none other than Grant Zinn. Grant is the founder and CEO of Beastcoast, which he's going to talk a bunch about, I hope, because I think they're doing such amazing things in the esports space. Grant, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here. Excited to chat everything Beast Coast.
Grant, for our listeners who maybe don't know about you, don't know much about Beast Coast, would love a little bit of the gaming history and like when you started, why you got into gaming, what was that first moment, what you guys are doing and focused on at Beast Coast right now. Would love a little bit of the Grant and Beast Coast story.
Sure, yeah. So I think similar to a lot of people from the gaming space, just grew up playing a ton of video games, competitive, had this drive to compete. I wasn't the best physical athlete, but I was a great gamer. And so I, really found this as my area to win at, right? And, back in my day, as we say, being a pro gamer wasn't like a career. I'm like, hey guys, I love gaming. I want to be a pro gamer. And that just was like a no-go, right? That's not possible. And so went into the real world, got some real world jobs, but continued my love of gaming and esports and all things in that world. Worked at Squarespace, worked at Bleacher Report, did a lot in marketing, did a lot in podcasting, TV production, things along those lines, while still continuing my love of gaming. And about 8 years ago, when I knew that I was going to create Beast Coast, it's actually Beast Coast's 5th anniversary, but 8 years ago, so 3 years before I started Beast Coast, I went to my first ever live, super major gaming event. Like I've been to smaller ones beforehand, but I went to the International in 2014 at Key Arena, saw it in person, saw the fervor, saw the fan base, saw how insane it was for the first time, was a part of that. And that day I said to myself, I'm going to start my own team and be at the International one day. And that was last International at TI10. So we've come so far in 5 years. And, I've just always pushed myself and pushed Beast Coast to be the kind of team that I always dreamed that it could be. And we've done so much.
Grant, I would love a little bit of, anytime we get an esports org on the show, I love to understand how the founder or the CEO thinks about their org in the context of other orgs, right? Like what makes Beast Coast different from FaZe or 100 Thieves or Liquid, or right? Like what is the thing that you would describe that makes you guys different or differentiated in some way, whether it's culture thing, a business thing, like whatever it is? What is that thing that you put your finger on and say, this is how we're different?
Sure. So that thinking has changed for me over the past couple of years. Before I started Beast Coast and around when I started Beast Coast, it was the era of the gold rush. Let's put it that way, right? Where so many people were diving into esports, like a ton of outside investment was coming in, and there was still a lot of what you might call unscrupulousness happening in the industry. And that was something that I had always been a big, hater of, obviously. Having come from the pro gaming side and had relations with a lot of pro players, seeing them mistreated, seeing them, abused, seeing them just taken advantage of was always just like a besmirchment to me on what the industry could be. And my methodology and my thinking when I started Beast Coast was, it isn't so hard to treat people with respect and treat people well and, build the kind of gaming team that the fans want to see and players want to join, and is just, something that could be better than what's out there. And so for me, a big reason why I wanted to start Beast Coast was that there are a lot of crummy orgs out there. I thought I could do better, and we've been doing better over the past 5 years. And, in the beginning, when I started Beast Coast, our thinking and our thought process was around, let's just be the best team we can be. Let's give all of our players and talent the resources they need to win, make quality content, put our players first, and just be the best team possible, right? And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we really had to change a lot of our business understanding of what esports is and what it can provide and how we can, essentially grow and make money in this industry. And I think that for us, that's when we really came across our way of thinking now, where we think the ultimate needle mover within esports and within gaming is not in competitive tournaments, and is not in team performance, and is not in those things. Those are a huge part of it. But the biggest thing that we can be doing within gaming is to create media and create content and to create a fan base. And so what we look at now is we consider our pro teams and our pro players as important marketing assets for all the content we're creating about them and around the games that we play. And so if you play Dota 2, there is no more authentic way to learn how to play carry than watching a guide from Hector, who's our carry player, about how to play Wraith King. For us, the content is the biggest part of esports and the biggest part of this industry. And, that's how we see ourselves differentiating ourselves from some of our competitors who are more so focused on creating a massive brand or merchandise or things along those lines. For us, it's about finding the best content creators and empowering them in the same way we previously thought about empowering our players to create the best content possible, reach the widest audience possible, and make new fans and grow their audience. And so that's sort of where we've, I think, differentiated ourselves more recently than we had when we previously started.
Does the focus on content creators imply that winning matters less to you guys? Because they're, I always describe this spectrum of, on one end, like teams who winning is the only thing that matters, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, I put called the hoodie orgs, where it doesn't really matter if you win. It's about selling merch and it's about making content and things like that. And it's a spectrum, right? Every esports org, I feel, falls somewhere on that line. I mean, do you feel that, because your original vision, which I thought was so cool, was, I want to field a team at TI. Mm-hmm. Having accomplished that, was that the impetus to step back and say, we've done this, we've achieved what we want to do here, and now it's about content creation, and winning TI maybe doesn't matter as much?
So I think it's a great question. Thanks for that. So I think that, especially for me, like, I'm a diehard competitor at heart. I love to win. It's just core to who I am. But I don't think winning tournaments is a core business strategy for any business. It's just not something you can really solve for. Like, anything can happen in any given tournament. And if your business ethos is, I'm going to win everything, like, good luck. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's tenable. For us, we love to win. We love to compete. But it's not core to everything that we do, in the sense that, win or lose, we're still here to have fun. And I think something that is core to Beastcoast is, our mission statement sort of is like, we love gaming and we support gaming in any way, whether you're casual, whether you're competitive. We just want to do what we love every single day and make the best content possible that fans love. And, we're here because we love to compete, but we don't live to compete. Does that make any sense? I think, to add on to that is that if you look at Beastcoast branding, it's a lot softer and more palatable than what I used to call the gunmetal red and black that defined esports for so long. Ultra masculine, ultra competitive, ultra, ride or die, I win or I don't eat type vibe. And so for us, when we started Beastcoast, we wanted to build a brand that was for everyone, because everyone plays, everyone wants to have fun in their own way. And I think by creating a more palatable brand that, we're a little bit softer, we're teal, we have a cute mascot, that I think has helped us to have a more diverse and interesting audience than just the pure, I'm going to win at all costs. If I don't win this tournament, I'm going to smash the controller and storm out of here. Like, that for us has never been why we play.
I'm curious, Grant, were there any learnings or any experiences at either Squarespace or Bleacher Report that kind of inspired the way you thought about Beastcoast, the way you thought about being different from other orgs? I mean, we're talking so much now about, again, what was going on in the industry and what you hoped to fill or change. Was any of that inspired from your previous work, or was more of that inspiration and passion just from your love of gaming and who you are?
So I think that it's a little bit of both. When I was at Squarespace in 2014, 2015, you rarely saw non-endemic sponsors in esports. It was still very early days. And when I was on the marketing team, because of my love of esports, I had pushed Squarespace to get involved in esports, get involved in gaming. We did some Hearthstone tournaments, we did some Dota 2 tournaments. And that was, like, at least for me, like, one of the first non-endemic companies to really stick their foot in. And it wasn't like a huge deal in, like, the context of esports that you see today. But now Squarespace is a sponsor of CLG. And I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't sort of planted that flag when I was there and been like, guys, like, Squarespace is a digital-only product for a digital-only consumer. Why are you not advertising to the most digital consumer on the planet, gamers? And that to them was like, this made so much sense. And then within, when I was at Bleacher Report, I was hired as an associate producer as part of a show called eStream, which was part of E-League, which was huge at the time. And we did a show that aired every single day on the Bleacher Report app, 10 minutes, all gaming, all esports, what was going on. And that, to me, was a great opportunity to, meet more people in the space and talk to interesting people every single day and travel to tournaments and things along those lines. And sort of creating a run of show every single day for an entire year about pure gaming. there's always someone to talk about, right? And I think some of the lessons there is that when I was at Bleacher Report, I think we were trying to cover everything and in a certain way ostracize a lot of people, because if you're a fan of Dota 2, like I could care less what you have to say about League of Legends. Do you know what I mean? And so I think by trying to cover everything, we've really siloed ourselves, because there's not a lot of people who want to hear everything esports. They're here for a specific reason, specific game, maybe a couple games. But if you're just trying to go so broad, you're just missing everyone. I mean, to me, that was an obvious lesson from traditional sports where, Inside the NBA is only about the NBA. Like they're not going to talk about football on Inside the NBA. And they've become smart enough doing traditional sports over time to realize that to make traditional sports content, you have to cater to your audience. And that's what we've done at Beastcoast with our own internal content, where we've partitioned out the games that we play into specific audiences where we know that our Pokemon fans aren't going to want to watch our Dota content. And so we don't try and show them that. You know what I mean? And so by siloing ourselves, we're allowing ourselves to create the best in class content for our specific audiences without diluting what we're creating for them, right? And if they want to jump around and go between our different games, we're happy to make that happen. But we know that they're here for a specific reason. Let's give them what they want. And I think that that's enabled us to grow pretty quickly and make, pretty interesting content for our audiences in a way that they weren't getting before, by just knowing what they want and giving it to them.
Paul, if you like this tangent that I'm about to go on, please jump in as well. But Grant, I'm curious, as we're getting into growing different audiences across different games, different interests, what have you noticed as successful for perhaps, like you were mentioning Pokemon versus Dota? I mean, is everything distributed on the same stream, even though there might be different channels, right? Different pages specific to those audiences. Is everything on the same platforms? Is the content creation itself, the editing, the time? I mean, I would love to get a deeper understanding as to how you go about creating the content, distributing it, and how your audience consumes it, and if there's any learnings in behaviors across different fan bases.
Sure. I think that, the content that our talent create, almost all of them stream, whether it's on Twitch or another platform. But the content that we create, for the most part, internally at Beast Coast, besides live events that we've run on Twitch, is more so just on YouTube. And it's more so, I don't want to say scripted, because a lot of it's not scripted, but it's written out content like a game show or like a guide or a tier list. And we get, creators on with some hosts or without some hosts and just talk about whatever it is that there's to talk about that day. Guilty Gear patch came out. Who's strong? Who's weak? Who got buffed? Who got nerfed? Content like that. Or, an episode we put out recently is what your main says about you. Like if you play this guy, what kind of person are you really? And that type of content is, I think, that something that the fans have really enjoyed. And one thing that we've recognized a lot is that within gaming, there's so many individual bespoke creators creating amazing content alone. And we've worked hard to bring those creators together to make even more amazing content together that they would never have been able to make on their own, that I think has really helped grow our audience quickly. And the thing that's most interesting to me about the business behind the content within gaming is that think about how many creators are creating content in their basement, in their apartment, alone, unmonetized, and have built an amazing audience on their own. What could they do if someone supported them and helped them make even better content? And that's what Beast Coast is all about, right? We take the guys who, let's say, random example, do Pokemon challenge runs, right? And enable them to collaborate with the best VGC player on the planet, or things along those lines, right? Where you get two people from different areas of the same category, put them in a room and see what they have to talk about together. Where maybe I'm from the Pokemon TCG, but I'm talking to a guy from the Pokemon VGC, where it's a completely different game, but where they're here for the love of Pokemon. Maybe one guy teaches the other, they behind the scenes, like cut stuff like that. It really helps, I think, our audiences become more engaged with the game that they're passionate about, maybe from a casual perspective. I think the most interesting thing about Pokemon is that it's the biggest IP on the planet, right? But from an esports perspective, no one is investing in it. And I think that is a huge error, where you have games like League of Legends and Valorant, which are drawing all the esports eyeballs, and they become extremely frothy and competitive. But Pokemon viewership at scale across the entire IP is much larger than Valorant by leaps and bounds. And so if we could come in and help to grow that and monetize that, I think that, dollar for dollar, it's a much better investment than investing in, an extremely high caliber team that maybe doesn't even make it to the LAN event, because you can't solve for that, right? It's not a guarantee. And so for us, it's more so about just the love of gaming broadly outside of just pure competitive esports that I think is the most interesting part about the industry, right? We see ourselves as esports is the tip of an iceberg, but there's a huge part under the water that no one's even looking at that we are trying to drill down to and work with.
What is it? Why do you think everyone's sleeping on that opportunity, Grant? Like the Pokemon thing specifically, or maybe some of the ways you think about other games? Like why do you think it's largely ignored or doesn't get the same hype at least?
I think it's because, the publishers who dictate esports as it stands right now are pretty like delineated in the sand, right? You got Riot, you got Blizzard, you got Valve, you got Epic, and those are like the big heavy hitters. And like if you play a game, maybe EA also or 2K, there's a bunch of them. But if you play a game made by those developers, you're guaranteed developer support. There's an ecosystem, there's a way to succeed, and I think people are looking very linearly into just esports as those specific titles and not really branching out themselves out further into the games that aren't really considered esports, right? And so I think that, is Pokemon an esport? There is a competitive ecosystem for it. It's niche and not massive, but I do think that there are so many Pokemon fans who don't even know that Pokemon esports exists. If I like the plushes, I'm a Pokemon fan, and I can reach you through esports or through Pokemon and teach you something new that you maybe didn't know before about the IP that you love. And I think that is like a little bit more of a harder work because, there's tons of Valorant players. Let's be real. Like so many people playing this game, and competitive Valorant and casual Valorant are one step away. But me liking a Pokemon plush and me playing competitive Pokemon are like 10 steps away. But I think making those 10 steps is easier than most people think.
Interesting. How do you guys think as an organization, as a business, about new games, right? Like new game XYZ comes out. Maybe there's an official esports scene. Maybe there isn't. Like, what is Beastcoast sort of strategy around new games? Is it wait and see? Do you prefer to dive right in? Like, how do you guys think about new games?
We look at them pretty closely. I mean, when we think there's an interesting new game that's out, we try and make an investment in it, and we think it has legs. I think part of it for us is, the competitive side is obviously great, but we want to invest in it two-pronged approach, competitive and content, right? If we're going to get into a game, we also want to be making content about that game and investing on the content creation side. And so for us, as an example, we were one of the first teams to play Valorant. A lot of the players that we fielded when we got into Valorant are still high-level, incredibly successful players who are on the best teams, playing really well. And we scouted those guys at the very beginning. And there was like a meme on Reddit where like if Beastcoast had stayed in Valorant, they would be a top team and blah, blah, blah. The reason why we're not in Valorant is where I come in sort of antithetical to a lot of the people in esports is where I think these franchise leagues and I think these big, massive multi-million-dollar investments are not a smart investment. I think that they are not the way to go. From my perspective, the core problem with franchise leagues and franchise esports is that rights holders and developers will never be aligned with the teams that play their games in terms of why they're there, right? At least for me, for Riot, the LCS, the LEC, Valorant competitive are all just ways to grow their game and get people to buy skins and buy guns and play their game. For them, the viewership and the growth of their leagues as a media asset is less important to bringing people into the game. And so if you look at something like the NBA, where there is no rights holder, no one owns basketball, everyone in the NBA is aligned in the effort to make the NBA as big of a product as possible. And I think that as it stands within those franchise leagues, the alignment just isn't there. Everyone who's playing Valorant wants Valorant to be the biggest thing it can be, but Riot is more so focused on making Valorant the biggest game it can be, and the media asset of Valorant is less important to them. And so for us, we got into Valorant, we had a very successful team. We knew franchising was coming. We knew what Riot was looking for from a franchise applicant, and we knew that we love the game. We think it's a great game. We think the ecosystem is really good. The players are fantastic, but we do not fit Riot's bill in terms of who they want to be in their league. And so for us to play that game for 3 years just to apply and get denied was just a fool's errand, at least in my opinion. And so, you've seen it now with some of the details coming out. A lot of organizations are dropping their Valorant teams because they didn't move through Riot's system. And obviously that's terrible for the players, terrible for the ecosystem, but it was always inevitable, at least in my mind. And that's why we, exited the game when we did, because we just knew that it just wasn't where we were going to end up being from an investment perspective. And not to say the game is bad. It's a great game. I watch all the tournaments, but we know what Riot is looking for from, a Valorant franchise holder. And it's the organizations that are owned by traditional sports teams. It's the organizations that are, have extremely strong venture capital backing. It's the organizations that, basically the people who are already in the LCS, those types of organizations, or like in the Overwatch League or the CDL. So for us, it was just a matter of, we're not those guys right now. We're not going to be those guys. Our thesis is different. And so we don't want to be in franchise games.
Grant, do you look at that though and go, we know we don't want to be in franchise leagues, and I agree with you. I think it's probably not a good investment. But if a great Valorant content creator came along, would you look at that and can you sort of compartmentalize and say, this person has no ambition to be a Valorant pro, but makes some great Valorant YouTube videos? Is that something Beastcoast sort of can separate, or your strategy really is one with the other?
I think it is something we can separate. I think that we doesn't have to be locked in together. I do think that they align and synergize really well with each other to have a competitive asset and a content asset, because they just synergize so well. But it's not exclusive, right? If we were able to find a best-in-class Valorant creator and create best-in-class Valorant content, I still think that we can do that at the end of the day. I mean, for us, our goal is to build the biggest media company within esports as we can. We think that gaming media broadly is just so unsupported, unconsolidated. And for us to come in there and work with these creators to grow their content and consolidate that audience across all of Beast Coast, we can get into any game we want. We're not limited by the games that we're in from a competitive perspective. But it just matters that especially at the beginning, we're a small company, we've grown a lot, to have those assets together. But I think at scale, like long term, there's nothing stopping us from making content about a game we don't play.
So, I mean, you're in a handful of games already. You have amazing flexibility to get into a game that you want to get into, provided it fits your thesis. What are you looking at? It's been a tough year for games in general. What's exciting you? What's on the horizon? What can you share a little bit about Beast Coast's future and any games that you think again, without anything that you firmly committed to? I don't want you to expose anything. But yeah, curious what's exciting you these days.
So I think the most interesting thing about esports, ever since we've made this, thesis decision around media and gaming, is that COVID was a huge low moment for, I think, a lot of esports teams. All the tournaments got canceled. There was nothing to compete in. Online events were not great. How do you motivate and energize a fan base when you can't compete, right? For us, when we decided that content was our future, COVID was actually a huge upswing, because everyone's sitting at home. What do you think they're doing? Playing video games, watching YouTube. We can make content that these guys are going to watch. We're winning, right? And so for us, competing or not, we are excited about the future of esports and of gaming. People have mentioned a lot over the past few months, like, oh, there's a recession coming. Gaming's going to go down, sponsorship is going to go down, blah, blah. Viewership is going to go up in a recession. That's what's most important. And so if we can capture that audience and we can grow our fan base and we can make the content that they want to watch, if they're sitting at home and they're not spending money, they're going to be watching our content because it's on YouTube and it's free. And so that's what energizes me, and it's energizing for us. And so, we announced our Pokémon expansion at the end of last year. We've signed some amazing creators, more to come that we're really excited about. Can't talk about them specifically today, but obviously, maybe not obviously for you guys, the new Pokemon generation is coming out at the end of this year. And we think that is going to be, an amazing breakthrough moment for us with this new game. We want to really use this as an opportunity to push Pokemon as an IP from a competitive and casual perspective. 100 plus new Pokemon are going to come out. Everyone's going to want to know what they are, who they look like, what their types are. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they cute? Are they ugly? That just is a huge area for us to make tier lists, make guides, make content about, merchandise. The entire IP for us is just ripe to do whatever we want in. And I think the coolest thing about gaming is that there's an audience for everyone. People have really done such a good job of limiting themselves and limiting what they think is gaming, what they think is esports. And I think that's been very dilutive and uninteresting to the scene. There are videos on YouTube about Super Mario speedruns and what's the best level and what's the best, game. And those are all gaming content that people can watch and enjoy that isn't strictly esports, but fans watch it and it's so highly viewed. I mean, I think people look at the viewership of some of these Minecraft creators and they look at that and be like, that's not esports, that's not pro gaming, that's whatever. But to us, if it's gaming, if you're touching a keyboard, you're touching a controller, interacting with a gaming IP, even if it's not playing, plushes and stuff, that's still content we want to be talking about, content we want to be creating, because it all ties back together. And I think that for us is what motivates us to keep growing and keep doing what we're doing, because gaming just as a whole is just so exciting.
You'd covered earlier, and we're getting onto this topic now, so I'd like to redirect a little bit. How are you monetizing this content? I mean, what's successful for you guys? What's keeping you afloat?
Yeah. So for us, we have great partners for our competitive teams. Like that way. Shout out. They work with our Dota 2 team. They're an amazing partner. They help us do everything we do in South America. But for a lot of the content that we're creating on YouTube, there's a YouTube programmatic ad ecosystem that everyone is very familiar with. You watch a video, there's a skippable ad in front, you hit skip after 5 seconds, you don't think about it ever again. What we do is we work with our brand partners to make integrations and content that aligns with what we're creating to have a more authentic response with our audience, right? Where our audience can really understand that these partners are helping us create the content they love, and they're endemic to us, and they feel like they can really trust them because they're supporting their favorite content. And it's actually true. Some of the stuff that we've created, we could never have done without our partners. We did a Smash tournament in the heart of COVID when there was nothing going on. It was like the biggest event in COVID with Four Loko, which is a partner that I think you wouldn't really think about ever working with in gaming. Four Loko Fight Night. It was an amazing event. And we've been able to work with a lot of partners that you wouldn't really consider to be, oh, this is an esports sponsor. Like we've done partnerships with men's skincare companies. We've done partnerships with wealth management companies. We've done partnerships with McDonald's. We've done partnerships with companies across the board, because we're just making so much authentic content that it just is easy for a brand partner of ours to slot in and work with us in a way that is more needle moving than just, hey, I have, a skippable ad in front of the video, or I have 100 logos on my jersey, and it's difficult to parse out who they are. I think a lot of esports orgs have reached critical sponsorship mass where you look at their jersey, you look at their website, it's just and the dollar amounts are great, but at a certain point, you just can't get any more. It just doesn't make sense. And so for us, with this brand partnership strategy, some of the people that work with us don't work with our competitive teams. They just work with our content. And that enables us to be infinitely more flexible with, our monetization.
Do you seek out these, call them, non-endemic or atypical sponsors, Grant, because you look to activate differently with them? It's a better fit with your organization and your ethos as a whole, or do they find you? I'm curious, how does it usually play out? Is it because they know you guys do a different, have a different take on sponsorship activation and they seek you out? Or do you seek out, groups that are maybe non-endemic because they're more willing to do something different?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think what I was talking about before about what is esports has diluted the sponsorship marketplace, and not even the sponsorship marketplace, just this the brain space of everyone out there, right? Where if we start talking to a men's skincare company, they think about esports, they're thinking about what we define as esports, which is the games and the publishers I listed. And they're not thinking about, casual Pokemon content, right? And so we have to educate them on what we're doing that's different within esports, where we don't really consider ourselves strictly a competitive esports team as our business anymore. We consider ourselves a gaming media company with an esports team as a marketing asset, right? That's how we define ourselves. And so now when we talk to some of these brand partners, we're not saying, hey, we're an esports team, come advertise with us. Where if I'm a men's skincare company, how do I integrate with a pro team, right? He's not going to come out on stage, do a skincare routine, and then play, right? Maybe he'll do some content offline, but it's a much more difficult integration. And if it's a brand that isn't endemic to esports and the fans don't know who they are, what they do, if they just see a logo on a jersey, that's not going to be enough for them to want to interact with that brand, learn about them, educate themselves on what they do. They just need to see it more in the flesh, and that's where the content side comes in, that I think is much more needle moving for them. Because if you look at an average esports jersey, the majority of the logos on the jersey are brands we're already familiar with, right? And so it's not a question of education, just a question of visibility. If my favorite team is, let's say, TSM, right? And I see the Cadillac logo or whatever logo, HyperX, whatever who they have, I already know who these brands are. And it's nice to see them work with TSM, but at the same time, it's not as much about education. It's more so about like this visibility, right? And so for us, it's for a lot of these brands we work with are brands who want to get introduced to the gaming space, but the gaming audience doesn't know who they are yet. And so through our content that's very endemic to our audience and also to our partners, it helps us to make that introduction to our fans and let them become a shareholder in the esports mind space.
Grant, I've been dying to ask maybe the dumbest question today, and I know we're a business podcast, but I have to ask because I'm curious. Why Beastcoast?
Mm-hmm. So interesting thing. So at the time that I started Beastcoast, there were no esports teams in New York. It was still pre-Overwatch League, pre-CDL, pre-everything. And I was sitting there. I was like, I knew I want to start a team. I want it to be fun. I want it to be lively. I want it to be for everyone. Where do I start, right? And I was just like, ideating on names. I'm from New York, and I'm like, okay, well, I live on the East Coast. Like, what if I just throw a B in front of that, call it a day? And that's how Beastcoast was born. And then obviously, like, our logos are wave, ocean themed. We're on the coast. And from the FGC community, which we have had like a very strong backing, and that's where we got started. The coasts, we're always just like, who's best? New York, LA, who's better? That kind of thing. And so we sort of came from there. And so we're like, we're the Beast Coast, like we're the best, that kind of thing. And obviously, like, not all of our players are from the East Coast. That sort of thought process doesn't really resonate with us much anymore, but it's where our name started from, right? We have players who are from California, which early days would have been like a cardinal sin, where we're an East Coast org. Why are we signing a player from California? But there are good players from all around the world representing all kinds of cultures and all kinds of backings, and we just want to support the most interesting and unique creators we can, regardless of who they are, where they're from, what they're doing, and we just want to help them be the best version of themselves and make the best content they can create and interact with their fans and make new fans in the best way they can.
I just have one last question, Grant, before we move on to everyone's favorite new segment. So much of what you've discussed is evolution, I find, right? Like, is how your thinking has evolved, how Beastcoast has evolved over time, and the years you've spent in the industry. Like, what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for you and for Beastcoast in your mind, in terms of how the business evolves and how the industry evolves?
Sure. So, thinking to the next 3 to 5 years, I sort of like to start with everyone's first gaming moment that really just, for them, made them fall in love with gaming. For me, it was when I opened the box of the N64 and I played it all night with my dad in the basement when I was 8 years old or whatever, right? That moment to me was like the nostalgic moment that brings me back to who I am as a core gamer, right? And so for us, when we're looking at new games and new avenues, we want to bring everyone back to that moment when they first booted up their Game Boy Color, when they first, played their first game of CS or whatever it was for everyone. Everyone has a moment like that. And so, there are lots of gamers out there in the world that played a lot when they were kids and loved it, but have gone on to like boring jobs and like boring careers and gotten married and fallen out of love with gaming. They don't have time for it anymore. And so for Beastcoast is, how do we bring those people back? How do we get those people who love gaming once or still love gaming and let them feel what they felt when they were a kid, when they booted up their first game, right? And so for us, getting into games like Pokémon, for me, is like the cornerstone of that sort of philosophy where, this is an area where people aren't investing. It's a game we all used to play and we all used to love. Let's bring that back, right? And there are so many games out there on the horizon over the next 3 to 5 years that are undiscovered and untapped and no one is thinking about. And I think that those are areas that we are going to be heavily exploring. And I think it'll be surprising for people to see what we do next in the context of, is this esports? Is it gaming? This is very unique. Like, it's going to be a very cool 3 to 5 years for us. I think people will be surprised what we do.
Very cool. I love that.
I think that resonates with a lot of people. I also, grew up playing N64, specifically in the basement. It's always right, like the joke, right, playing in your mom's basement or your family basement. But I think that definitely will resonate with a lot of our audience.
Mm-hmm. That brings us to everyone's favorite new segment, Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. The way this works, if you're new to the podcast, Jimmy's going to ask Grant a few rapid-fire questions, get to know Grant better as a person, as a gamer, as a business person. Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Grant, first question. What is your favorite video game of all time?
I'll probably say the Pokemon franchise. I mean, it might be obvious given how many times I've mentioned it on this call. But it was the first game I ever played. It really spoke to me. I'm still obsessed with the franchise. I think it's amazing. From a competitive esports perspective, I would probably have to say Dota 2. I played Warcraft 3, I played World of Warcraft. From an MMO perspective, obviously World of Warcraft. My top three: Pokemon, Dota 2, and Warcraft. I would say, for all different reasons, but those are the games I always come back to, play all the time, even today. And I'm just really passionate about.
Paul would probably kick me off the show if I didn't ask, are you Alliance or Horde?
Horde.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Me too, Grant. Lotar.
Okay.
Love it. Let's see. What is your favorite adaptation of video game IP in either books or cinema?
Interesting. I think something that's been interesting over the past couple of years is that video game IP renditions have historically been awful. I think everyone sort of recognized that, where they would make video game movies and they were bad, and they were really bad. Like, not like funny bad, they were just like awful bad, right? But I think
like
over the
Warcraft
past
movie bad.
yeah. But I think over the past couple of years, you've had movies like the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, you've had Arcane, you've had the Pokemon Detective Pikachu movie, and so the quality of these movies is just getting significantly better. And like, I've enjoyed all of them. I think they've all been very good. In terms of my favorite, it's hard to say. I will say it's not out yet, but the upcoming Super Mario movie with Jack Black being Bowser and Seth Rogen being Donkey Kong, I think is going to be hilarious. So I'm gonna put a thumbtack in that and say that will be my favorite, just because I think it'll be extremely surprising.
I thought the Seth Rogen casting was spot on. How do you feel about Chris Pratt?
I think a lot of people have a lot to say about Chris Pratt. I think we all have the Mario voice in our head.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting his name, but his voice is so iconic. He's done it for 20 plus years, and it's going to be really weird to not have that voice. Yeah. I am cautious. I don't want to say I'm optimistic. I'm cautious. The other voices, I'm buying into more, just because they don't really talk. Bowser is grunting. DK is making his DK noises, and so for them, I'm more open to it. But for Mario, it's going to be an interesting story. Hard to say.
Definitely. Let's keep moving along. That was my personal interest. I got distracted there. How about your go-to gamer snack or drink? So when you're playing yourself, what are you snacking on?
Okay. I have to say, like, a curse from my high school and college years, I still haven't outgrown it. Being an adult is instant ramen and Gatorade. I think like everyone has like their cursed food. And like for me, it's just like, if I'm gonna play some ranked games or just hang out on the weekend, I don't want to cook. It's just like, man, it's just so cheap and good, and it just gets the job done.
Doesn't it get cold when you're playing though? That's like a tough one to mix in.
You run over, you make it, it's instant, boom, it's hot, you eat it while you're playing. I will say, it's been very cool from a gaming perspective to see all the DoorDash, Grubhub, types of sponsorships that have happened lately on Twitch and things along those lines. But I will say there's nothing worse as a gamer than to be in the middle of a ranked game and you have your doorbell ring and have to get up and get the food. Yeah. And so, I don't think the commercials are doing a good enough job explaining how don't order while you're about to queue, because if you're in the middle of a game and the doorbell rings, or the food comes and you're in the middle of playing it and it's getting cold, those are all red flags. So, I think gamers need to be aware of when to order and when not to order, because I've had tons of my games pause hey, delivery's here. And I'm like, bro, just order after the game. Come on,
Grant, I think you're onto something here. The DoorDash app needs to report the status of your WoW raid to the person bringing the food to the door, so they know, let me wait, see how it goes, and then ring the door.
A direct integration right into the game. Look, that's Blizzard, it. Riot, Valve, these guys are out here, they're spending money, time to collaborate. I want a battle pass that rewards me with food for how I perform in game.
That's such a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Would that mean that if you're not good at the game, you'd get faster deliveries because you're more likely to wipe and they know that you're a noob? They're like,
it's possible. It's
we'll
possible.
Deliver him first because they're not going to make it.
Honestly, if I get a cool skin or I get $20 off, McDonald's deliveries, if I'm a gamer, I'm into that,
Yeah.
All right, Grant, last one for me, and then I'll kick you back to Paul. If you could go back to school, what class or major or subject matter would you want to pursue help you with what you know now and with what Beast Coast is currently doing or hoping to achieve in the next several years?
Yeah, actually, we didn't touch on this when I was doing my intro, but my background is not in like a normal business facing industry. I went to art school, and so my initial goal before I started Beastcoast, before all of this, was to work on games and work on movies and work in animation. I worked on some cartoons on Adult Swim. I've done a bunch of cool cartoon stuff, and like a lot of the stuff that Beast Coast creates today is a byproduct of my background, which has been really helpful. But what is not a byproduct of my background and a core part of running a business is going to business school, which is something I never ever did. And so, obviously, having run Beast Coast, having run Beast Coast successfully for 5 years, I've had to teach myself everything that's required to run a business. But it would have been really helpful to know that going in and not have to teach myself how to like do spreadsheets in Excel and like do tax reports and file things or whatever. And so going back, if I could say to my past self, like, hey, you're going to run a business one day, maybe take a couple business classes, would have been helpful.
Good advice.
Definitely. Thank you, Grant. I'm going to give you back to Paul here.
Grant, first of all, thank you. Such an amazing story, and I love what you guys are doing. If you want to be found, followed, for people who want to stay on top of what Beast Coast is up to, like where can people follow you and Beast Coast?
Sure. So for us, you can follow us at Beast Coast. We have, on Twitter, Instagram. We actually just split our Instagram into a North American and South American Instagram because we have such a passionate South American Dota fan base. Our Dota team is based in Peru, that it was difficult for us to talk about anything we were doing in North America because our South American fan base only wanted to talk about Dota. So when we're like, hey, our Rainbow Six team just won, they were like, who cares? When's Dota on? Like, so we had to, separate them. And so you can follow us on Beast Coast SA and Beast Coast NA and on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter, Grant Zinn. Also follow us on TikTok. Our Beast Coast TikTok team is doing an amazing job creating amazing content, and follow us on all of our YouTube channels, of which, some of us are Beast Coast branded and some of us are creator branded, but in total it's probably like 40 plus making amazing content every single day in all sorts of different interesting and amazing gaming categories within Dota 2, within Pokemon, within the fighting game community. And if you're fans of any of those games, definitely check us out on YouTube. And, if you're fans of games that we don't play, stay tuned because we might be playing your favorite game in the near future.
I love some of the videos you guys make, Grant. I think everyone should be following you guys on YouTube because I really think you're doing it better than anyone else. So very cool. Thank you so much for being on the show. Jimmy, thank you as always. For our listeners, guys, just a couple of housekeeping points. We do a live stream every Wednesday. It's at a new time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So for those of you on the East Coast and on the West Coast, it's in the middle of your workday. It's a new show. We do it live with you guys, so it's very interactive. It's a lot of fun. We highly recommend you guys show up for that every Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And also, don't forget, subscribe to Business of Esports everywhere. On YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, literally everywhere you get our content. We put out a ton of content other than the podcast and our live stream every week. And we thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget the most important thing, guys. The future is fun. We'll see you next week.